My name is, and I am a Gunnery Sergeant in the Marine Corps. I've served honorably for 18 years, and I was recently boarded for administrative separation. Today is 21 December 2022, and yesterday I received notification from the Commandant of the Marine Corps to seek employment elsewhere. From Commandant of the Marine Corps, dated 19 December 2022. To the Commanding Officer, Marine Corps Air Station Iwakuni. Subject: Administrative separation for Gunnery Sergeant, USMC. Per reference A, B, and C. Your recommendation in reference A to discharge Gunnery Sergeant for misconduct due to commission of a serious offense with a general, under honorable conditions, characterization of service without suspension was carefully reviewed and considered. I find that the preponderance of the evidence substantiates the allegations in the notification that form the basis for separation. I also considered medical information that on 1 September 2022, Gunnery Sergeant received a medical screening which revealed he had not been diagnosed with PTSD or TBI. Lieutenant reviewed the charges and concluded that Gunnery Sergeant's condition did not contribute to the actions for which he is pending administrative separation. Paragraph 2. Discharge Gunnery Sergeant without delay, with a general, under honorable conditions, characterization of service without suspension. This letter in paragraph 6210.6 of reference B are the discharge authority. Use separation, Hotel, Kilo, Quebec 1. Assign re-enlistment code RE3 Charlie. Block 28 of the DD-214 should read: misconduct, commission of a serious offense. The discharge authority is also contained in the Marine Corps Total Force System Unit Diary entry. Use option 30 to review the history statement. Paragraph 3. Per reference C, Gunnery Sergeant is not eligible for separation pay. If Gunnery Sergeant cannot be discharged within 30 days, immediately contact Headquarters, U.S. Marine Corps, MMSR 2, via separate correspondence. Signed, James F. Glenn, Deputy Commandant for Manpower and Reserve Affairs. I enlisted in the Marine Corps 2004 out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I remember at that time I was living in my car during the winter time. And I wanted to obviously first change where I was in life, but change who I was as an individual. And then one day, something inside of me just snapped, and I walked into the recruiting office and said, I want to become a Marine. When can I ship out? Ultimately, I left about a month later or so. And at that time, I wasn't really on good grounds with my parents. So I didn't tell anyone. More or less said, hey, I'm leaving for Marine Corps training tomorrow. And that was about it. I was 22 when I joined. So I ended up leaving Milwaukee, just like everyone else, early in the morning, going to MEPS, shipping out to MCRD San Diego. Next thing I know, I'm in Tornado Palms, California, going through my MOS school. So when graduation time came around, my roommate had a girlfriend that he wanted to marry. And he also wanted to go to Japan. But I convinced him that if he went to Japan, he wouldn't be able to take his girlfriend. He wouldn't be able to, get married and all this other stuff. And so I convinced him to switch orders with me. So I ended up going to Japan as my first duty station. Went to Okinawa, Japan. Had a blast. I ended up getting married out there and extended for an additional 3 more years when I re-enlisted in 2008. Unfortunately, the career planner at the time was getting out, so I got my re-enlistment bonus, but I more or less moved from one building in a parking lot to another building across the parking lot as my new duty station. Regardless, I deployed as an IA billet, an individual augment billet, in 2010 to Qatar with the Air Force. So shortly after I re-enlisted in 2008, MARSOC had set screening dates to come out to Japan in order to recruit. And at that time I hadn't heard of MARSOC. I didn't know what it was. MARSOC was still young. And so a bunch of my buddies and I, we got together and we're like, yeah, let's go find out what this is about. Let's go sign up and, see what happens. So we all got screened. However, since I had just re-enlisted, I was obligated to the 3 years that I signed to stay in Japan. A bunch of my other buddies, they left, they went over to MARSOC. Regardless, in 2010, I deployed as an IA, as an individual augment billet with the Air Force to Qatar. And when I came back in 2011, I had received orders to MARSOC out in Camp Lejeune. And so I was pumped. I was ecstatic. I was finally going to be able to do something. And so I get out there, and I was at the battalion S6, pretty much not really doing anything. We all just kind of sat there like nobody's getting selected for deployments, and eventually they did a reorganization within MARSOC. So a lot of the individuals that were at the battalion level moved up to the support level. And so the mentality for the guys that remained behind was that if we stayed at the battalion level, we would be closer to the teams, closer to the company level, and we would be able to deploy sooner than if we went up to the support groups, which ended up being the complete opposite. The guys that were sent up to support battalion went directly through the pipeline and were deployed as soon as possible. I believe I started the pipeline early 2014, maybe late 2013, and then finished the pipeline at the end of 14 and deployed pretty much right after that with Golf Company. And so when I came back from my deployment, I remember being at home with the kids, my son and my daughter. And my daughter, who's the youngest, was in the living room crying. I wanted to go over there and console her and try to see what's wrong. So I bent down to her level, tried to pick her up, and she just cried more intensely, and just would not let me pick her up. And looking back, I understand why. Because to her, she didn't know who I was. I had been gone for easily half of her life. She was about 3 years old at the time. And, you know, I'd been gone on deployment, which is 6-7 months, gone for workups and exercises, just back to back, and just always gone. And, you know, training in pipelines and stuff like that. So she didn't know who I was. And she wouldn't let me pick her up. And I think that was the hardest experience that I had to endure at that point in my career. It was just not being able to pick up my own daughter. So following that short return home, I deployed again with my company. And so when I came back in I think it was early 2017, my family was just, it was torn apart. Out of the 6 years I was in Lejeune, I was gone easily half of the time for 3 years. You know, like I mentioned, just with deployments and workups and exercises and training and, you know, everything military related. And it was not very conducive to the family structure. So when I received orders to Miami and I reached out to the individual that I was scheduled to replace, I asked about the op tempo, and they had mentioned that there was going to be a lot of traveling involved due to operational commitments within MARFORSOUTH. And ultimately the decision was made that, you know, it would just be me going to Miami. I think that's when I became more dependent on alcohol, because I fell into depression, and I didn't seek any help. And after arriving in Miami, I ended up getting a job at a local restaurant as a bar back. And part of my mentality was, because if I was ultimately able to surround myself with more people more of the time, then I would be less lonely. At least that's what I thought would happen. But I just kept drinking more. Not to a point that it ever affected me at work but it affected me in a social aspect where I would only go out to get drunk. So when the time came to select my next duty station, I wanted to go to Japan again, just because I had a lot of fun the first time, and I wanted to come out and experience it again as a more mature individual. And on my way out here, I went to 29 Palms for some MOS training, and then arrived here in September, middle of September 2020. And so, my whole time before arriving here was very small unit leadership centric, which really started at MARSOC. Due to the fact that I was the senior enlisted for a 10-man team, and I had to assess and implement the Marines based on their capabilities, their MOS proficiencies. And I took that quite seriously. And so when I deployed again with my company, I was still the senior Marine, senior enlisted on the team. I was not the individual holding the senior billet. So my role, which I accepted, was to advise and assist the younger staff sergeant in his roles as the C4ST chief, is what position he held. And that was primarily due to the fact that I had jumped into that deployment at the last minute, right before Raven, which is the culminating event before deployment. I had no issues with that, being able to advise and assist my peer, because I wanted him to succeed, and if he succeeds, then we all succeed. So when I came out here, I didn't know what to expect. I was hoping, because my previous time in Japan as a platoon sergeant, I had roughly 30, 40 guys under me that I was accountable for. And when I arrived here, I think I had 2 Marines, maybe 1 Marine at the time, and a whole handful of contractors and GS employees, and a master sergeant above me. So coincidentally, our OIC, our captain, was deployed at the time that I arrived to Qatar, where I was also at in 2010. And so falling back on the small unit leadership aspect of growing up within the Marine Corps, in 2020 we didn't have a Marine Corps ball. And so myself and the other staff NCOs decided to buy drinks and celebrate with our junior Marines and take the time to build camaraderie and build upon that esprit de corps. So the intent was not to have a frat type of social gathering. It was not, people were not slamming drinks, we're not taking shots, we're not going crazy. It was an opportunity for the junior Marines to ask questions to the senior enlisted that were in attendance in regards to their time in service, or maybe questions that those individuals had. And it was a time for us as staff NCOs to share stories with our junior Marines. We wanted to use that opportunity to build that unit cohesion that was severely missing when I arrived. At the end of that, the event in the office that took place after the safety brief, we all kind of dispersed. We all went back to our houses or barracks, wherever everyone lived. The junior Marines decided to keep drinking, and in doing so, a couple of the Marines got into a physical altercation, and one was taken to the hospital, and another was apprehended by PMO because they had pulled out a knife. So I think they both received NJPs at that time. So when I arrived here, I only had a master sergeant here. My OIC was gone. The director had just jumped ship. He had just left, and there was a GS employee that was kind of in charge of us, but kind of not. He wanted to be, but he wasn't. And so he kind of slipped into the position of the director. In his introduction to me, introduction to the unit, one of the first things that he had said to me was, "You're in charge of those shitbags down there, and you need to make sure to shape them accordingly." So I took that with a grain of salt. It's not my job to evaluate an individual based on somebody else's perception. So when I left that meeting, it kind of left a bad impression on me, just with that interaction. And so I go down, I start working in my section, I start meeting the individuals, and so I start evaluating and assessing them based on my own experiences working with them. And sure, some of them had flaws, and some of them were outstanding, and there's a whole spectrum. But none of them were so bad that they warranted these accusations that this individual was, providing me. I start to build a rapport with these individuals, with the people that I'm working with, and I let them know, I'm like, hey, this is what so and so said, and a lot of them were like, yeah, that's just the way that individual is. They start to divulge more information. They say, yep, they weren't surprised by the comments that individual made, because in their words, that's the way he is, and that's the way he's always been, and he's not going to change. And so I start pulling that little thread a little bit more, start getting more stories, start getting in contact with individuals that used to work in that organization that were no longer there, and they all kind of focused in on one specific individual as to why certain positions were always vacant, or why certain positions had a high turnaround, and it all came back to this individual. So I made my own notes and whatever, and this individual, for whatever reasons, didn't like me, and it wasn't necessarily that he didn't like me, but he didn't like staff NCOs in the position that I held. And it wasn't my own conclusion, it was the individual that I had replaced, my predecessor. He had informed me of this individual, and this is how he is. If he wants to micromanage, then sure, whatever. That's not my style. I've never been micromanaged. It was always, this is the direction that we're going, you better meet us there, and that's it. That's the end of the line. For somebody to be in a leadership role and not to take on the leadership responsibilities associated to that role or that position, that just kind of got to me. So eventually I asked around, and more individuals kind of came out and had the same experiences with this individual that I was having, where he was kind of standoffish, didn't want to identify or mentor anybody that he was in charge of. And this individual was a Marine, like he was a staff sergeant when he got out, so he should have at least some knowledge of leadership and responsibilities of a leader and a mentor. He just didn't take those on. He just didn't want to take those on. So as I kept peeling back the onion, I started noticing more and more of these red flags, and eventually I collected enough evidence to bring up an allegation of a hostile work environment that this individual had created, and that other individuals within that work section had allowed to perpetuate. And so I brought him up to the sergeant major at the time, and he pulled me aside and he said, "Are you sure you want to start this investigation?" And I was very adamant about it. I was like, "Yes, Sergeant Major, let's do this." And his comeback was, "Just so you know, if this goes through, they're going to investigate everything, to include you." Which I didn't know at the time what it meant, but he had insinuated that because of what happened in November, something might happen to me. So at this time, it's early 2001. There's a lot of friction between myself and this individual, and nobody's really standing up for me, bringing up these allegations of a hostile work environment. My predecessor, who was still there within the organization, he knew what was going on, and he was not only a witness but directly involved in some of those altercations with that individual. Come to find out that, he later backtracked on his statement to me that he would support me 100%. Then March of 2021, we had an extended weekend, so we had a 4-day weekend, and there were several families within our work section that decided to go on a trip to Kyoto. We arrived there, and we all, as a group, go to, I think it was a German restaurant. We all get a bunch of beers, we're all having a good time. Marines are buying beers, everyone's just buying beers, we're having fun, we're having a good time. And then we all kind of disperse and alright, we're going to meet up again on Saturday, the day before we leave. And so Saturday night comes, and I meet up with some of the Marines. At the time, bars were considered off-limits establishments. So the intent was to in Japan you can walk around with open alcohol containers, the chu-hais and highballs and everything like that. So the intent was to walk around and just drink and, have fun, whatever. And so yes, we did go into off-limits establishments. In other words, bars. I don't recall when I blacked out, but I blacked out at some point. And so at one point in the night, there ended up being a drunken misunderstanding between myself and a Japanese local national, where the individual had alleged that I had stolen his wallet, in addition to roughly $1,200 US, which would later be repaid in excess with Commandant money, which is very common out here in Japan. So that night I ended up going to the Japanese police station. They took all of my possessions out of my pockets, and at that time I didn't have any of his possessions on my person. Come to find out through the investigation that that gentleman eventually did find his property, because we were all drunk. He didn't know when he lost it, and he didn't know when he actually recovered it. And so we all get back to base, and then I was investigated or interrogated by NCIS, and then also interrogated by Japanese police. Shortly after, 13th April 2021, on this date I received a 6105 for the events that took place on 9 November 2020. 14 April 2021, investigations began with NCIS, and then 2 days interrogation with Kyoto Police Department, and a follow-up interrogation with NCIS. After that, it was really pretty much radio silence. I didn't get any word until 7 October 2021. On this date, I received a 6105 for the events that took place in Kyoto on or about 27 March 2021. Also on this date, I received my notification of separation proceedings for administrative separation. At no time in my career had I ever been negatively counseled. Have I received negative paperwork? Have I ever been NJP'd, court-martialed, or adverse fitness reports? If an event occurs, negative paperwork is processed. It's not, if an event occurs, nothing happens until another event occurs, and then you go back and create paperwork for an event that happened half a year ago and repeat the process. From President of the Board to Convening Authority. Subject: Administrative Discharge Board Report. Findings and recommendations in the case of Gunnery Sergeant. Findings: Preponderance of the evidence. The Board has determined by majority vote that the preponderance of the evidence proves only the following actions or omissions alleged in the notification. Proves that Article 92 UCMJ failure to obey a direct order or regulation, in that Gunnery Sergeant did at or near Kyoto, Japan on or about 27 to 28 March 2021 violated a lawful general order by entering multiple off-base bars, which was and remains in direct contradiction to COVID-19 mitigation measures set forth in Marine Corps Air Station Order 6220.1 Quebec. 2. Proves a violation of Article 121 UCMJ larceny in that Gunnery Sergeant did, at or near Kyoto, Japan on or about 28 March 2021, wrongfully took a wallet from a person that contained a driver license, insurance card, credit cards, an ETC card, and approximately 116,000 Japanese yen, all of which were property of the state's individual's name. The intent required for larceny is the intent to permanently deprive an individual of the use and benefit of his or her property. Now, if you recall, during the investigation, that individual stated that he didn't know when he lost his property, and he didn't recall when he found his property again. Recommendations. By majority vote, the board recommends separation from the Marine Corps. If the board recommends separation, it recommends the characterization of general under honorable conditions. If the board recommends separation, it recommends the separation should not be suspended. Pretty much means, get the fuck out. Prior to service matters, the board did consider such matters, but only on the issue of retention and not consideration of characterization. This means that they reviewed my service record in its entirety from 2004 until 2022. They also considered character statements, which I'll go over in a minute. Minority report. A minority report is generated when one of the three individuals on the board recommend retention. Minority report. I, warrant officer, last name, believe that the member in this case should be retained. He has shown during his 18-year career that he can and has served honorably. I do not believe that his career should be terminated over one night of poor decisions. After this incident, he was invited as a guest speaker to a corporal's course, which is a great honor. This clearly shows his ability to bounce back from this and continued fidelity to the cultivation of Marines. He has also performed his duties over the past year well and without incident, confirming his abilities to rehabilitate, and shows he does not pose a distraction or detraction from the morale and welfare of those around him. My belief is that he can continue to serve honorably going forward. And that is the end of the Administrative Discharge Board report. So I'm going to go through the letters of recommendation that I received on my behalf throughout this process. Dated 28 June 2022 from 1st Sergeant, USMC retired, to Administrative Separation Board. A letter of recommendation for Gunnery Sergeant. In February 2020, I deployed in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation Inherent Resolve, and unit deployment programs. I started my career as an 0621 field radio operator and an 0629 radio chief. I deployed in support of OIF with 1st Battalion 12th Marines. I earned the MOS of 8511, drill instructor, where I led 8 platoons while earning drill instructor and senior drill instructor of the quarter. I was also meritoriously promoted to staff sergeant during this tour of duty. I had the privilege to train, screen, and evaluate officer candidates at Officer Candidate School, and served as a sergeant instructor, platoon sergeant, and company 1st sergeant. I was also selected to serve as the Assistant Marine Officer Instructor. As an 8071 Special Operations Capabilities Communicator, I deployed in support of OIR and served as the communications chief for Gulf Company, 2nd Marine Raider Battalion. My last tour of duty was H&HS Battalion, Quantico, Virginia, where I served as a company first sergeant for training and education company, supporting 3 general grade commands. I was also a member of the FY17 Staff Sergeant Selection Board and was a voting member of several remedial promotion boards. In 2015, I had the privilege to meet and serve with Gunnery Sergeant, assigned to Gulf Company in support of OIR. His desire for continuous growth made him the unit's most knowledgeable data marine. I selected him as the data chief, despite having 3 staff NCOs to choose from. His actions and behavior were exemplary during our pre-deployment training, and even greater during our combat deployment. During our time overseas, Gunnery Sergeant served as a vehicle commander for critical resupply missions to our unit and coalition partners. In order to maintain a low profile, these missions consisted of only 2 civilian up-armored vehicles. He also provided technical support to other special operations teams, including Navy, Army, and foreign militaries. This Marine had my full trust and confidence to get the mission accomplished in a professional manner with technical precision. He had other mission requirements as well. He has assisted with engaging Iraqi nationals, as I was the pay agent for our company. We were responsible for managing supply and equipment acquisitions in support of the unit's forward operating base that totaled over $500,000. He also served as the watch officer in our Tactical Operations Center, assisting with the battle captain in reviewing concept of operations and tracking our special operations teams throughout this battle space. I never doubted his capabilities, and to this day it would be an honor to work with him again. I would entrust him with my life as I have before. Gunnery Sergeant continues to demonstrate that he is both a skilled technician and a strategic thinker. His awards detail the great achievements earned while serving with Marine Special Operations Command as an 8071. Many Marines in the communication field get screened to an 8071, but few are selected. Even fewer applicants can handle the intense operational tempo experienced at that command. In 2018, Gunnery Sergeant was selected as the Marine Corps' Best Communication Marine by the Armed Forces Communications and Electronics Association and was presented the Military IT Leadership Award. This award was presented by the Marine Corps' Communications Chief. More importantly, Gunnery Sergeant continues to fulfill roles and responsibilities with his current unit, entrusted to retain his current leadership billet, top secret clearance, and functional responsibilities despite the timeline of this incident. This is indicative of his professionalism and confidence he inspires from unit leaders. Having been in your position, I completely understand the difficult task you have before you. Without hesitation, I recommend Gunnery Sergeant be retained to complete his current enlistment and allow him the opportunity to retire from our beloved Corps. This isolated incident does not summarize his personal and professional character and achievements of the past 18 years. With that being said, I support he be held accountable for his misconduct and be processed for a battalion NJP. Gunnery Sergeant is an asset to the Corps, as his overall service record outweighs this incident. I strongly support him for retention. If you have any questions, please contact me. Dated 3 February 2022. From Lieutenant Colonel, United States Marine Corps, to Administrative Board members. Subject, Character Statement for Gunnery Sergeant. I have had the pleasure of knowing Gunnery Sergeant longer than either of us have been in the Marine Corps. As such, I feel confident to speaking As such, I feel confident speaking to Gunnery Sergeant as I've known him for the past 30 years. I am unfamiliar. I am unfamiliar with all of the specific details surrounding this event, but I can say with certainty it is not reflective of the man I know. Gunnery Sergeant and I met back in Wisconsin over 30 years ago, in the years of playing sports together. Our family's friendship grew. We remained in touch over the years as I accepted my commission in the Marine Corps and moved away from home. I was later thrilled to hear that he had decided to join the Marine Corps because I was absolutely certain he was exactly the type of person anyone would want to serve alongside. Our paths crossed again during our time at MARSOC, where I served as an air officer, and Gunnery Sergeant was serving as a communications chief. The nature of aviation support of ground forces inherently ties these two billets together. As a result, I can personally attest to the competence and utmost professionalism. In an organization comprised of many hand-picked, thoroughly screened individuals, for him to stand out is no small feat. His dependability quickly gained recognition. He has become known as the go-to guy for anything communications related. Another aspect of an organization such as MARSOC is the level of autonomy expected from all members of the team. There are individuals that thrive or fail with this increased level of freedom. His success in an organization like that is clearly credited to the trust he gained from his leadership. To be clear, I am confident, based on the character I have personally witnessed throughout the years, the Marine Corps is better off with him in its ranks. Without first-hand knowledge of the details surrounding the event, I acknowledge there is another side of the story. That said, I am certain whatever happened is not indicative of his character or his years in service in our Marine Corps. If given the opportunity, I would actively seek to work with him in the future. Dated 4 February 2022. Members of the board, my name is Lieutenant Colonel. I am currently serving as the G6 Operations Officer, U.S. Marine Forces Command. My previous billets include 3rd Marine Radar Support Battalion, Executive Officer, 3rd Marine Radar Support Battalion, Communications Company Commander, 11th Marine Expeditionary Unit Assistant Communications Officer, Commander, Naval Surface Forces Pacific Landing Force Communications Officer, and 1st Battalion, 1st Marines Communications Officer. I have 18 years of service in the United States Marine Corps, having enlisted in January 2004 and commissioned in March 2005. I met Gunnery Sergeant in February 2016 and had daily interactions with him while preparing for scheduled deployments in support of U.S. SOCOM operations. After he returned from a deployment as an experienced Special Operations Capability Specialist Communications, he was a valued member of the team training new SOCs-C for future employment. He mentored NCOs and set expectations for the level of independent technical skills and high maturity level required for service with Special Operations Forces. Typical MARSOC deployments involved operating in highly politically sensitive areas of operation. Gunnery Sergeant exhibited a high level of maturity, which made him a sought-after enabler to support these types of operations. He is a quiet professional who consistently advocates for his Marines. Although having recently returned from a 6-month combat deployment to Iraq in support of Operation Inherent Resolve, he volunteered to deploy again in 7 months so that another Marine could deal with a family crisis. Even as the command scrambled to identify who had a healthier dwell-to-deployment ratios, he presented his case that he knew the Marines' personal challenges and wanted to step in. His actions remain one of the most selfless acts I've observed during my service. His military bearing is one of many strengths. He maintains a professional relationship at all times between seniors and subordinates. His experience and expertise helped in refining the mission requirements. And when it comes time to execute, he is a team player. He is always part of the solution to a problem, and never the source of that problem. He showed up to work every day ready to perform and accomplish the tasks at hand in the most expeditious manner. He has never been subversive with me or led me from truth. He gained my complete confidence, and if given a chance, I would choose to serve alongside him again. He is a humble leader who is focused on mission accomplishment and developing subordinates. He has served in the United States Marine Corps for the past 18 years. I do not believe he sees his service in the Marine Corps as a simple job, but a lifestyle and higher calling. When we discussed previous units where we shared knowledge of a Marine, he has always had an anecdote about their service together and could speak to the persona of that Marine. You can clearly see the pride he has in the many personnel he has served beside. He truly views the military as a brotherhood to which he has faithfully served. He is always quick to earn others' trust so that they understand his level of dedication. Based on his faithful service during my interactions with him, I would gladly retain someone with his work ethic and character. His many years of honorable service, both home and forward deployed, should be at the front of a decision to retain him in our Corps. I've got 15 of these. I'm not gonna go through all of these, but I've got 15 character statements, letters of recommendation that can attest for the 18 years that I've been in the Marine Corps. So it's with a heavy heart that I have to say, it's with a heavy heart that I have to say goodbye to an organization that has been such a significant part of my life. For the past 18 years. Serving in the Marines has been an honor and a privilege And I'm grateful for the opportunities that I've had while being a part of this esteemed organization. Over the years, I've had the opportunity to work alongside some of the most dedicated and courageous individuals I've ever known. The camaraderie, the teamwork, and the sense of purpose that I've experienced during my time in the Marine Corps is something that I will always have to look back on. Even though I'm leaving the Marine Corps under less than ideal circumstances, I am proud of the service that I have provided and the sacrifices that I have made. I'm grateful for the skills, the experiences, and most importantly, the friendships that I've made and gained during the time in the military. And I know that they'll stay with me for the rest of my life. As I move on to the next phase of my life, as I move on to the next phase of my life, I will always carry with me the pride and honor of having served in the Marine Corps. I will always be grateful for the opportunity to have been part of such a remarkable organization. And I will always hold the memories of my time in the Marine Corps very dearly. So having received this letter of administrative separation, I now have 30 days to leave the Marine Corps. There's a part of me that feels betrayed. It seems that my 18 years had just been thrown out the window because of one incident. An incident that I was never appropriately held responsible for. So this is my goodbye to the Marine Corps.